All right. Hello and welcome everybody to the Symphony Talent webinar, how a strong tech foundation leads to recruitment marketing agility, featuring CVS Health. I am Brandy Ellis, and I am with Symphony Talent, former Smashfly legacy, and I've been in the talent acquisition space coming up on 20 years. I always tell everybody that I'm not going to put a number on it in order not to age myself, but I lead our recruitment marketing strategy and services function here at Symphony Talent, and over the years, I have had the pleasure and the honor of working with Kerry, Noone, and her team. So I'll let her say a little bit about herself as well.
Hi, Brandy, and thank you so much. Yes, I'm not going to age myself either because I think I have a couple of years on you, but love the space. Very excited to join the conference today or the webinar today, and looking forward to sharing a little bit about what we're doing over at CVS Health and the team, the lean, mean team behind everything.
So it might seem really strange to say that 2020 was a year of great opportunity. But if your strategy was agile enough to act on it, it really was. And for some, that meant emergency high volume hiring, adjusting to a COVID vaccine release and needing to ramp up for that. It's a sneak peek into what Kerry's going to talk about. For others, it was maintaining consistency and communication through tough times. But overall, it was an unprecedented chance to talk to talent in relevant ways and really positively connect your brand to their struggles, their life experiences, and their hopes for the future. So, how does a company maintain or create agility during a time like 2020? We think it came down to building a strong and having a strong, consistent recruitment marketing strategy first, through planning and putting a foundational tech piece in place that you can adapt more quickly when all of the unexpected happens. In our 2021 Recruitment Marketing Strategies report, we analyzed recruitment marketing tactics across the Fortune 500's career sites, talent networks to see what the world's leading brands were doing, and also, probably more importantly, not doing to engage and nurture talent. And we found that the companies with the strongest tech foundations and the most consistent employer brand and recruitment marketing approaches, very much like CVS Health, were the ones agile enough to launch impactful hiring initiatives and brand first content and campaigns that really landed with talent in a meaningful way. So, at a high level, we are going to cover surprising benchmarks on recruitment marketing adoption over the last 6 years. And I think I've had the honor of hosting this webinar in particular over the last 3 years. And we're going to talk about some of those highlights specifically. So, an in depth look and examples at what the recruitment marketing pioneers do differently. Real life examples from bold companies who are venturing out into new territories in recruiting, and then actionable ways and takeaways to boost your recruitment marketing strategy today, this month, and this year. So before we dive into that, let's talk a little bit about the report, the methodology, the criteria, and sort of the history of the report itself. So for those of you that have listened to our webinars in the past, you'll know that year over year, our team very diligently collects pieces of information from all of the top employers in the Fortune 500. So from August to October of last year, our team collected publicly available data across 27 criteria in 6 different categories, from career sites, social channels, and the talent networks of the Fortune 500 as of 2020. And then once data collection was complete, we assigned a numerical point value to each criteria and then used an analytics platform to stack rank the companies and then group them into 5 grade buckets. To be objective as possible, scoring is based on exhibiting each of the 27 practices. So it was either present or not how well the company does in each practice. So our research this year spotlights the recruitment marketing tactics that are readily available and pretty easily implementable across your teams and across your systems. So all of the A's are considered recruitment marketing pioneers. They're the leading organizations that adapt emerging tech early. They have a very clear forward thinking strategy for engagement, personalization, and nurture. So we'll spend most of our time today talking about what the best practices do from the top 14%. In over 6 years of doing this report, more companies in the Fortune 500 this year offered talent networks, implemented chatbots, and sent consistent talent communications than ever before. But while adoption of recruitment marketing strategies and tactics are trending positively in general, the recruitment marketing maturity itself is still surprisingly low. Given the demand for recruitment technology, differentiation, and transparency that our contacts and candidates are looking for, the adoption rate of some of these tactics are really still surprising. So these are the adoption rate for every single recruitment marketing tactic that we benchmarked. And you'll see here, adoption is trending up, but there's a lot of opportunity for growth when it comes to some of these. And Kerry, I'm going to put you on the spot. Are there any specific areas that jump out to you that are underutilized as a recruitment marketing tactic?
Um, a lot of them jump out, um, but I'll have to be honest. What jumped out the most for me, and I'll talk a little bit about it, but it is the very last one, sends content other than jobs. And
Yeah.
that jumps out only because we recently sent out, literally last week, sent out a newsletter to all of our contacts asking them what kind of information that they wanted. And surprisingly to me, they wanted about 50%, 52% actually want jobs. So I think when it says 7 down there, sends contacts other than jobs, that's speaking mostly about job alerts. So in the newsletters, might want to hear about the company, but they also want to learn about what that means for job opportunities for them. So how do you tie that content back to something that's actionable in your newsletters and email communications?
Yeah, that's a really great call out because you're right. What I've seen across several of our customers is we're doing these amazing content pieces, and we'll see some examples here in a few slides. But when you ask directly of the active readers that are replying, what do they want to see? Well, they want to see jobs, but then they also end up clicking on pieces of content that tell them more about the job or the environment or the culture at the company. So you're absolutely right. It's how do we tie the information that we're sharing back to how do you use this in order to be a more effective job applicant or job seeker or potential hire? So I think for me, the three most shocking findings, like we said, the adoption is there. 76% of the Fortune 500 have a talent network. That's up pretty significantly from when I did this a couple of years ago. The surprising part is that only 54% send communications after the thank you for joining email, and a shockingly low, only 7% send any content other than jobs. So, as we're thinking about doing an activation of our employer brand and expanding our recruitment marketing, we're going to have these really great conversations coming up around what are we sharing and what types of content work with different groups. But in general, we're just not seeing that content other than just here is a job is being shared. And I think that's a really big opportunity here. So, if we look at the general talent landscape, high level, 19 million Americans at the time we put this together were out of work. 73% of job seekers are considering themselves as passive. So that's a shift that we've seen over the last 2 years, particularly over last year, where I think it was a LinkedIn report said something like 76% of recipients would be interested in having a conversation. So if we compare that with the 73% who consider themselves passive, a lot of potential employees today are riding out to see what's going to happen post pandemic and, post business operations. The other piece is that the 2020 Talent Board research report found that a great candidate experience increased from 25% to 31% last year. That's an increase of 24% from 2019. So the candidate experience is actually improving, which is great. And 66% of candidates surveyed were likely to make references based on their experience. So the actions that you are taking as a collective talent acquisition market are working. And it sounds like, and I can infer that people are really focusing on the candidate experience itself. So, how do we then tie those two pieces together of effective recruitment marketing, brand building, brand affinity, and making sure that we're curating a positive candidate experience at the same time? One of the big findings is that a strong tech foundation is the most important piece to the puzzle. So in 2020, businesses really needed technology to support them, whether it was automation to fill the gap of reduced teams, employees that they had to be let go, or help increase efficiency in high volume hiring and onboarding. So one of our projections is that we will see massive improvement in 2021 as companies try to lay a solid foundation in their talent acquisition technology choices to prepare for future events. Hopefully we don't have another COVID-19, but we don't know what's in the future. And I think this year was a solid foundation that talent acquisition teams figured out we need to do something differently in order to be ready. So, like we mentioned earlier, all of the A's are considered recruitment marketing pioneers. They're the leading organizations that adopt emerging technologies early. They have clear forward thinking strategy for engagement, personalization, and nurture. So, there's no surprise that behind these numbers, on average, there's a 42% difference in adoption rate between the A's and the B's and C's in these four key areas. So 81% publish content other than jobs on social. 74% are optimized for Google for Jobs, whereas only 31% of the B's and C's are. 66% send monthly email communications, whereas only 23% do in the B's and C's. And then finally, 45% of the pioneers send personalized jobs compared to the B's and C's at 13%. So let's look a little bit closer at what some of the best are doing better. So Salesforce was recognized as the most transparent diversity page. So even though diversity dominated conversations in 2020, surprisingly, diversity content decreased in 2020. And only 64% of the Fortune 500 companies that we looked at had diversity and inclusion content on their career sites or that was easily locatable on their career sites. And one of the biggest pieces that we know is that candidates, prospects, leads, whatever we want to call them, they want to know what you're doing, good, bad, or ugly. The contacts that may consider you as an employer want to know what's happening inside of your walls, particularly relative to diversity and inclusion. So Edison International, another one that I've had the honor to work with over the last couple of years, won the spot for the most informative talent network emails. So, like we said before, communication was everything in 2020. And with only 7% of companies sending content other than job alerts, if you incorporate a content strategy into your 2021 plans, you're going to be outpacing 93% of the Fortune 500. And then HP gets the spot for most user-friendly chatbot. So even though it feels like we've been talking about conversational marketing and chatbot specifically for years, Still, only 10% of companies have a career site chatbot. So if you want to meet career site candidates where they are at the time that they're engaging with you and improve your candidate experience, this is a really great piece of technology that you should put in place. Again, meet them where they are is one of the big themes that we're seeing in the pioneers versus the B's and C's. And then finally, Dix gets an honorary mention for the most personalized employee stories. So it's really great to see personalization climbing in the charts relative to adoption. So employee videos and written employee stories both sit at about 51% adoption. So here, the area of opportunity is getting these videos and stories into enhanced job descriptions. We know that, as Kerry mentioned, your recipients want to see jobs, but we also need to educate them on what's happening inside of our four walls to know if they're going to be a fit with our culture, with our expectations. So, one easy thing that you can do is look into enhanced job descriptions where you can embed videos or content that will supplement the job itself. So, this takes us to our number one company for this year that absolutely stood out in a number of ways. And that is why Kerry is here. So, we're going to talk a little bit more just about the CVS Health strategy, some of the tactics, some of the volume that they were facing. And as I mentioned earlier, CVS is helping. Is a gigantic player in the COVID-19 vaccination effort. And so, how, Kerry, did you go about ramping up for that on top of everything else? Yeah, I think this is one of the quotes that you provided to us. You've been number one for 2 years in a row now. And I really think you're setting the standard on what it is that employers need to do and the tech foundation and the agility required to be successful.
Yes. So when that quote, they don't react to trends, they set them. I'm not sure that I actually said that, but
I'll give you
I
credit.
will definitely. Okay. But I will say that the team, the talent acquisition team at CVS, our leader, the VP, he might have actually said that because that is his thought process. He wants to be proactive. He wants to, and this is something that he said 5 years ago when I joined the company, is look around corners. And that is something that you will hear a lot of us say often is looking around corners. What are we not seeing and how can we be prepared for what we don't see?
Yeah. So we'll talk some more about the actual tactics that you did for us in doing the evaluation. Some of the things that stood out for us that made contributed to your number one spot were your consistent branding. No matter where we looked, whether it was on social or talent network or on any of your number of landing pages or career sites, there was a consistent look and feel and expectation of engaging with the company as a contact or a candidate. Your diversity content and the diversity pages that you're sharing on what it looks like and how it feels inside of the company, the search functionality, the ease of finding a job closest to me that is interesting to me, your talent network login, the calls to action in several places throughout your career site, and then the conversational engagement that both your recruiters host, particularly on the pharmacy side with high demand talent, as well as your chatbot. So the big question that I ask Kerry, especially offline when we're working together, is how do you maintain living your life, but also prioritize all of the requests that you see or that you receive? Sorry, you've made a gigantic impact, and the business kept operating. So outside of COVID, you already had a long list of pretty aggressive goals or big hairy goals that you were trying to meet. So how do you balance doing both?
Yeah, that's a great question. Some would say that we don't necessarily balance, but I would say that most would say that we do. And I'll go back to this slide here and talk about the consistent branding. So that is by design. It is. We hired a creative person, Amy, on our team 3.5 years ago now. It was probably the best addition to the talent acquisition recruitment marketing team, because she not only keeps everyone in line, but she does it in a way that's very organized. So going towards your question of how do you keep it all together and all the requests, and then not only the requests, but then reporting out on our activity, not to justify what we're doing, but to then build a case if we need to add additional people to the team. The first support request form, I think was actually generated by Amy, who leads our creative brand, our recruitment marketing branding. And it was to keep all of the multiple requests that have been coming through. And then that built into a robust set of support requests. So anytime a team member, a talent acquisition team member has a new campaign, or let's just say that their rec may not be seeing the volume that they need, we have a form for it. And we actually we joke about it all the time, because we say we have a form for that, because there's literally a form for pretty much everything that we could imagine that we would support. So content on the career site, a chat conversation with our Paradox chat, Olivia. So if there's a rec level conversation, we will build that out. If there is an employee highlight story, support in general, we still do flyers. Amy still will support flyers, that because we are a retail brick and mortar, so we have that point of sale. The other thing that we have capability on the team, and I go to that login button at the top there. So we could see through Google Analytics that the login page, the return visitor page, was our most trafficked site. So we turned that into not just a login page, but a hot jobs page. So taking a look at data and letting data guide us in the right direction.
Yeah, that's really big. I think we actually have a screenshot of that heat map coming up here in a few, or that login page. So I don't want to steal too much thunder from your next slides, but let's talk through CVS CVS Health, sorry, at a glance. You guys had some big moves over the last couple of years. What do you guys look like now? What is your volume? Kind of give us an idea of what your environment feels like. So I'm gonna say I think you moved up.
Yes, we are Fortune 5 now.
Ooh.
Yes.
All right.
So that we moved up last year, and I apologize for not catching that. I'm sure that my my team is major faux pas there. So, and I apologize for not only losing audio, but then also not catching that in our slide development. So I apologize.
No problem. Well, now that we know you're Fortune 5, you want to quickly walk us through kind of what your volume looks like, especially from supporting the talent acquisition team of a company this size.
Sure. Do you want to go ahead and go to the next slide and I can talk about that?
I sure can.
So we have about 300,000 colleagues at CVS that work for CVS, and it's a combination of when we acquired Aetna in 2018, end of 2018, and in 2020, it was just such an incredible year. So we already set out 2020 to reduce our advertising spend by flipping our funnel. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get to those slides. And then in March of 2020, COVID hit, and we had to accelerate our hiring. So we went from basically 0 to 60 in about 5 days. And we did that with partnerships, not only internal partnerships, but then also external partnerships with companies to build out custom landing pages. And the power of agility was never so evident as it was during that time. So we were able to build out custom landing pages using our Smashfly Symphony talent tools, and then also send targeted emails and messages to potential candidates, to people who are joining our talent community, people who've been displaced at other positions, and we were also able to reduce the actual application experience and getting people into positions much quicker. This slide is really how we tie it all together. And Brandy, you spoke about tech being the foundation of a talent acquisition team, and I'll add on to this to say that not only the tech, but also tech acumen. So in 2020, the very beginning, we actually hired a tech leader on the team. And basically, Kevin's role is to make sure that the entire talent acquisition team is trained and able to see the connection between whether it's Smashfly or Symphony Talent, to our social, to our surveys that we have on our site, to job boards. So he is bringing it all together and telling that story. So tying it all together from your candidate journey. And it's really, this slide, I borrowed this from Alin
Lynn
at
Bailey, yes, the
IBM. Yes,
originator of the Infinity Loop over at Intel.
that's right. And it's important to point out that the candidate journey doesn't stop at hire for us. So it's about the onboarding, it's about employee engagement. We're actually in the process of also launching an alumni talent community, so we can continue that infinity loop as many times as we possibly can with top talent.
So if I am a talent acquisition professional looking at this slide, at first glance, it seems kind of scary. But then I noticed that there are different pieces of technology in multiple places along the journey. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? You know, you mentioned your technology leader that is helping tie it all together, but it looks here like you've really done a good job of stretching out the technology base that you have across all of these different areas of the engagement lifecycle.
Yeah, so tech for the sake of tech doesn't do anyone any good. Costs a lot of money, causes confusion, adds workload. So we try to, when we're looking at new tech, we look at where it fits within the talent or the candidate journey. Part of also Kevin's goal is to reduce the tech stack. So if there is a tool that can be used during consideration, as in the candidate is considering our company, to attracting, like social media, even though you wouldn't necessarily consider social media tech, it's still the integration of the information that we gain from social media to the candidate journey is the tech behind that. So you should have seen the slide that I started with. So it had the different phases and it had levels of where the tech comes in at the different phases of a candidate journey. So when I saw the infinity loop, it all fit into place for me. So it's not the traditional funnel that we typically talk about, although I am going to reference a funnel in a slide coming up. It's more about how it all ties together and how are we letting tech and our knowledge of tech and our constant education of tech improve the candidate journey and candidate experience.
Absolutely. And we'll talk through some of the tactics that you use here in a couple of slides. I think for me, one of the standout activities that you guys do is the candidate surveying. So we do a shout out to the candies and the talent board research every year. And I wholeheartedly believe in the research that's done there. But a lot of companies will stop the surveying when the candies are over. And you guys have just added, I think, some additional survey points to get information so that you can then put it back into your technology stack. Isn't that right?
That is correct. So, and that was one of our goals for 2020, and talk about agility and not letting 2020 get in the way of progress. On January 4th, we launched a series of surveys, and they're automatically generated. So it's tied to our ATS. So we can continue to ask our candidates how their experience was. And it's not just asking because we want them to tell us how great we are. We want them to tell us where the glitches are. So that's the application experience and the pre-hire experience, where we are taking that a step further and looking at the entire infinity, again, that infinity, to make sure that once we are able to attract top talent to the organization, that we're not losing them in the first 3 months. They're not looking to move to another organization because they had a bad experience along the way. So constantly learning from our candidates is a priority. Candidate experience, I think, is my VP's, Jeff Lackey's, #1 goal for 2021, which therefore is all of TA's #1 goal. And so not just asking the candidates, but taking action on the information that we hear from them is very important.
And speaking of taking action, you mentioned at the top of the call that you are a small and mighty team. So, the balance to making sure that the technology is in place and you're doing all of this great evaluation and surveying, but then you have this gigantic list of outputs that come of it and that you need to act on. So then how have you set up your team to be able to do that?
Yes. So when I started in 2016, we were a team of 2. And then as we were able to bring on new campaigns, and by campaigns, I mean hiring strategies, we've been able to build the team. We're currently a team of 7, and each person has a primary source or a primary responsibility. And then really each person has a secondary source or secondary responsibility as well. And I'll use our Mike Tidmarsh, who came from, and I shouldn't say his name because there's somebody out there who's going to try and recruit him away, but he came to us from Aetna. And so he manages all of our Aetna hiring strategies. And from that, it might be a pop-up on our career site. It could be email marketing, it could be social media, anything, all of the above. And then his secondary also is informing and educating us on SEO. So where are people searching for, let's just say, a nurse position in Arizona? How are they getting to a job, not necessarily CVS? So he helps to educate us not only on that information, but then also on how people are coming into our site and what Google Analytics is telling us about that. I'll give another example. So Pete Succi, who is our clinical hiring lead, he also is our Brazen lead. So he is managing the multiple Brazen events and supporting the team, not just the clinical hiring, but the entire TA, and helping to support what they might need from a promotion point of view. And then,
So
of
for
course,
those
we
not
see.
familiar, what is Brazen? For those who don't use it and may not be familiar with it.
Sure. Brazen is our virtual career fair platform. So there are a couple out there. We actually use Brazen for chat as well, in addition to Paradox, but it's in 2020, and that's another big thing, and I'm sure others on the call or people listening would agree, we went from having in-person events to virtual. So we had to step up pretty quickly to make sure that the teams, the recruiting teams and the hiring leaders on location could use the virtual tools that we use. Our distribution center, the lead, Natalie over there, I don't know how she keeps up with the many events. I think in Q1, there are 38 events scheduled, and these are all virtual events. Not all on the Brazen platform. We also use Indeed virtual events. But I honestly don't know how she keeps up. Arranging and promoting the virtual events is a full-time job in itself.
Wow, it very much is. That's a lot of events.
And that's just one of the groups, just to keep up with the volume.
So if somebody is listening and has a small and mighty team, is there a tip that you could give them now? It sounds like, have your core area of delivery, the things that you have to focus on and the goals that you have to meet for business deliverables. But it sounds like maybe that everybody has a beneficial cross-functional focus as well.
Yes. And I would say our number one priority is not only candidate experience, but it's also internal client experience. So we'll often say, as long as our internal clients are happy, then we have the ability to explore other options. And I think being organized in those support requests help us to keep our internal clients happy. There's always, it's like, I think Brandy, we were talking about the other day, it's like laundry or email. If you think you have cleaned every sock in your house, you're going to walk into another room and find a dirty clothes basket full of more laundry. And there is no shortage of work to be done. And I think if you keep your internal clients number one on your list and making sure that they are happy and being able to tell a story with data, then you do have some luxury of exploring new tools. And we're always exploring new ways of connecting with candidates.
Yep. And to clarify too, for those listening, especially now that you're a Fortune 5 company, not just a Fortune 10, there are a lot of people that think that you're able to do this with a gigantic team, which you've just said you have a team of 7, and a gigantic budget, which, we're not going to talk about your actual budget number, but I know that you don't have an endless budget. So what
Yeah.
you just said about having the infrastructure of putting processes in place to manage the requests that come in, the asks of your time and your team's time, that really has allowed you to say, okay, we have this volume coming in, but we're not able to handle it. So we need to automate here, or we need to look for a solution here. I think those are, and I'm an operational geek. So for me, those are one of the really cool things that stand out about the structures that you've put in place.
That is a huge point, and it's very true. So you would think, and I feel like the size of the team, even though I say it's lean and mean and mighty, I feel very blessed to be able to have a team, because I started with a team of 2, and I've been at organizations where it's a team of 1. And budget, I won't talk about the budget number, but we are always looking to reduce spend. So it's, what tool can we bring in to improve the experience to get to a hire faster and quicker.
Yeah.
And I see you went to the next slide. So I mentioned this, candidates really are at the heart of everything we do. And that's something that hasn't changed since I joined the organization. I think it's no different from any other organization. Also, we want to make sure that the candidates are having a positive experience, but there are always things that we're discovering. So we have an email that people will email us directly, and it's, I can't log in, or what's the status of my application? So we try our very best. And I know this because I monitor that email box along with the rest of the team, but try our very best to answer every question that comes through, whether it's on social or in the email box or even monitoring the conversations in our chat bot. But this year, I think the candidate experience is just even more elevated because the volume has increased so much. And as I say here, every candidate is a customer or patient member. It's really full cycle. So not only are our employees customers, but our customers are also candidates.
Mhm. Or patients or family members of, I mean, you guys certainly do have a broad
Yeah.
impact with your various lines of business.
And that's something I hear a lot from in employee stories. A lot of people will say, I'm not doing this, for myself. I'm doing it because my grandmother is a patient, or my father goes to CVS pharmacy, or sister, or whatever it is. And then the people who are working on the front line too, they are our parents and our sisters and brothers. So we tie it. It's not hard to tie back the purpose of our company. So this slide here is about a year in a review, and 2020 was a year, and I can't say that 2021 is any different. It is really been from January 1st or even before that, with the vaccines, the vaccine support and the hiring for vaccine administration. It has been just a whirlwind. And you can see here, that's the career site traffic. And right around March is when we had that accelerated hiring. Obviously, the blue line is 2020 and the orange line is 2019. I think for me, in June, when we hit what we normally hit in an entire year of applicants, that was an eye opener for me, because traditionally, when you have volumes like that, most of the people are not going to get hired. So it just reinforces the need for constantly improving and learning from our candidates of how we can get better.
That's such a big number. I mean, to see a full year's worth of applicant volume only halfway through the year, especially at numbers this large, and you're hiring in very specific areas to support very specific initiatives going on, that I think would probably lead to a lot of the rest of your strategies. You probably had to pivot the rest of the year, didn't you?
We didn't have the luxury to pivot. Nope. We had to, and that's where I think the entire TA team comes in, because it wasn't just, the career site and making sure that the first visit to our career site was optimized. It's the career site changes day to day based on what we see the candidates doing or the job seekers doing. And then it also, going back to that tech stack. So when Kevin joined, it was probably an eye opener for him, probably. But then he also had to quickly gear up and do quite a bit of training on the tools that we have to make sure that the TA team could keep up with everything and the volume that was coming in. So it's not just, I have the luxury of sitting back and seeing that volume, but the recruiters and the different delivery teams, those are the teams that are actually doing the hiring and actually talking with the new hires and the potential candidates.
Mm-hmm. Before we move off of this slide, I heard you say our career site changes almost daily.
Yes.
Talk a little bit more about that, because there are people that are going to listen to this and say that is impossible to do. And what is it that you're doing to add or make relevant pages on an day-to-day basis? And I'll go to the next slide, because we have a couple of examples of your landing pages and your pop-ups and your call to actions, but making career site changes daily, I mean, talk more about that.
Yes, and Amy on the team cringes every time I get in there. I'll send her a text. Oops, I did it again, because so she's the expert in there. But the beauty of the tool is that I can get in and change something if needed. And so when we first accelerated, most of the work that was done over a weekend. You can see here, there's a lot going on here. So the banner at the top is a pop-up that we can geo-target. The blue, which is this is obviously geo-targeted also. So we have the pop-up there in New Jersey, and actually, in fact, it is geo-targeted, because Lauren, who I was talking to earlier, said it was beautiful in New Jersey. So it's working. That's good to see that the geo-targeted pop-up is working. So that it's targeted towards people who, based on the IP address, you can see in the middle of the screen there was an important security alert. So we were made aware of fraud attempts of people who were posing as recruiters. And we wanted to make sure that up front and center, that we wanted to make sure that the candidates knew that if someone posing as a CVS recruiter or a CVS executive, that we would never ask for you to purchase your own equipment or whatever it might be. We wouldn't communicate with anything other than a CVS Health email. And then that big black box, that is probably one of the best examples of ever changing. So when we needed to quickly hire pharmacists, we wanted it to the potential pharmacists and nurses and pharmacy technicians to be able to quickly find the jobs that applied to them. We use a tool, a heat map tool, so we can see what candidates are doing and I don't think there is a screen. I don't think I provided it, but pre this look and feel, we had a huge hero image. When somebody would come to the site, it was a huge hero image that didn't really do much other than it was a good looking photo and brand compliant and all of that. And then when we looked at the heat map, we could see that people were clicking, what they were looking for was the information about jobs and how to find that information quickly. So we completely rethought not only the design of the homepage, but then landing pages as well. And then as we build out a campaign, and Brandy, you and I worked on one early January, we created a new talent form basically overnight or within hours that would inspire people to update their profile information. And that was based on an email campaign that we sent out New Year, take a minute to update your information. So that flexibility really goes back to the title of the webinar itself, and the agility that we have with technology and our partnerships with the different technology groups.
And the heat mapping tool, again, is one that I don't hear many companies using. I can think of a small handful. It's essentially wherever a user's mouse hovers on a page, it will put, a warm placemat, if you will. When we go and pull the screenshot of what's happening on the career site or whatever page it's focusing on. And I think when we were talking about this, Kerry, you mentioned something about people were angry clicking on the search jobs function. And what did you do about that? Because I think the outcome is really cool.
Yeah, so it records the clicks. And when the mouse is scrolling all over, you can tell, basically it tells you that candidate, that job seeker is confused. They don't know where to go. There's just so much information. There's many call to actions, even on this screenshot. So what we did was we basically moved the job search. Even on our landing pages, they might have had a page full of content and at the very bottom, a list of the jobs. Well, we moved that so the jobs were up front. So going back to what we talked about, that candidates, job seekers are looking for job content, doesn't mean that they don't want to read more about the job that they might be doing. but what they really are coming there for is to get to the job. So somebody can apply for a job and then read more about, or on the job descriptions, like you also talked about with the dynamic um, job descriptions or job detail pages, we also use video. And so it might be a, a healthcare concierge in our health hubs, and it will be an actual healthcare professional, concierge professional, who's telling the potential candidate what a job might be like working at an organization.
Talk about a preview of the job. I mean, that you're using the employee advocates to tell the story for you, which is, I mean, any talent marketer's goal to be able to do. What are the ways what are 2 tips that you would give to a talent marketer to be able to get those videos produced or get through the red tape of having the employer agree to doing videos?
So we have a form for it. We have a form to request the all true videos. We also have an SOP if needed in place for approval process, like who do we actually need to get to approve it. The patients, I think, would probably be the biggest requirement. So you can ask people will be very excited to provide, they will agree up front, and then you just have to be patient with not only learning the tech, even though the All True tool is extremely easy, but then providing job aids. So if this doesn't work, the job aid that we provide, we have scenario 1. If this doesn't work for you, then try this. And if that doesn't work, then here's another option for you. And then also giving them some guidance on examples of the video. Natalie on the team will send a request to some of our leaders. She just sent a request to our chief diversity officer to provide some content, and she actually put a video in her email, which I thought was extremely creative.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Showing the use of the tech.
That's right.
If at a high level we look at all of these different activities, I'm going to go back to the infinity loop and the funnel discussion. It sounds like that you're really focused on top of funnel activities, but you mentioned at the beginning of the call this concept of flipping the funnel. Do you want to talk a little bit about this and what it is that you're doing?
Yeah, so this also started in 2019 with the goal to spend less on bringing people into the top of the funnel. We have about 7 million people in our candidate funnel. So instead of bringing more people into the top, what are we doing? How are we engaging with them? Are we sending them the content that they want to get from us and at the right time? And it goes back again to the tech stack and making sure that we are using the technology available to us in the right way. So it's not just about the recruitment marketing team either only. And I'd like to reiterate that because emphasize that because that is probably one of the most important parts of flipping the funnel. So the talent acquisition team, they know how to use the CRM because they've been trained. Kevin, who joined us last February, has weekly lunch and learns. He's constantly working with the leaders of each different group to make sure that they understand how to use the tool. And Brandy, you said it, I think last year at Transform or the year before at Transform, we're turning, as an example, pharmacists into marketers, which is exciting because we've said for so many years that recruiters are actually marketers, and in fact they are. So sales and marketing. So our pharmacy team is probably one of our best and greatest examples of how using the tool effectively produces results. Or our high volume sourcing team, which really talks to the middle of that funnel as well. And so I mentioned the infinity loop before, and even though I do come back to a funnel, there's not a top and a bottom, so that if you put the two funnels together, you kind of can see that infinity loop. So once they're in there, and even if they aren't current employees, they can still, ideally their experience will be so good that they will become brand advocates as well.
And I just realized I am a chatty Cathy. We are down to our probably last 8 minutes or so. So I'm going to speed us up just a little bit.
Okay.
And then hopefully people can listen just a little bit longer, because I think we have some Q&A that have popped up. So I want to make sure and leave a couple minutes for those as well. So, and this is relative to your CRM. You mentioned that I don't want people to go over is that you have 7 million contacts in your CRM. And so talk us a little bit through your email strategy and kind of what you've done relative to the requirements that you were facing.
Yes. So 2020, big learning year. So all of the all database emails that you see, those were already planned new for 2020. And it's been a discovery phase of what people are clicking on. So what's important to them. Ultimately, we do want applicants and we do want hires from the communication. So I love this slide because it talks about the reach that we're able to accomplish, but it also talks about the applicants that come through the communications. And when we look at metrics, those are some of the things that we look at if the campaign was successful. And then we spotted in some special accelerated hiring because it was 2020 and the work from home and the vaccine support. But this continues in 2021, the email communications, and we're continuing to target and find out more about what information they want to hear from us.
Absolutely. And to clarify here, a lot of people may look at this number of, the emails delivered versus the applications and go, wow, that's not that many when it was 36 million emails delivered. But you don't really have a apply to this job in your newsletters, right?
We do not. No. Sometimes we'll have a campaign like the work from home or the vaccine support, but in the general database emails, it's highlighting a story about the organization or highlighting an employee. There's always an option to search, but it's not just a job, and it's not just apply for this job right now. So it's sort of that underlying message.
Yeah. When I am talking to clients, I consider these bonus applications because we didn't
Yes.
send them a job and say, hey, apply to this. So it's a pretty good number for bonus applications.
And it's across all job categories.
Yes. So it's not just within, one area or, one area where you either have high or low volume.
Yeah.
I love this quote from you. Tell me about this.
This ties directly back to our how we work behaviors, which is essentially our employee value proposition and employment branding. So one of the how we work behaviors is walk in others' shoes and be brave. And so be brave enough to disagree. So disagree respectfully. Challenge the status quo. So just because we have done it one way for years and years does not mean we have to continue, which the accelerated hiring march, which we changed how we do things within, like a week and a half or 2 weeks or even less. But we also worked to make sure that we were compliant, because compliance is a big part of it, but making sure that we understand our capabilities. And really the recruitment marketing tech is the foundation, as you said in the beginning of the webinar.
And, the overarching theme that we're talking about here is that a strong tech foundation, obviously recruitment marketing pieces, but you've leveraged Alltrue, you've leveraged Surveil. I'm going to forget a whole bunch of them that were on that infinity loop slide, but you've positioned your technology such that you're able to make bold decisions and kind of push on your technology vendors. I can certainly speak to that part around what you're able to do and pushing the limits of that, which I think is great.
Yep. And it's not just tech, right? It's the people behind the tech.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Absolutely. who anyone still listening to the call is not allowed to reach out to Kerry's people. Remember that. So we want to wrap up before we get to Q&A. I think we have just a couple minutes left with our recommendations for, do it today, this month, this year, and just always ongoing recommendations. So first and foremost, do this today. Do your research and start with just one thing. So read the full recruitment marketing strategies report and look at the best practices, see what the best are doing. Certainly if you heard something from Kerry here and that you can implement that, please do. Take that and overlay it with the report, the Candies report. What are the areas of the candidate experience that you want to prioritize, and where do you want to make an impact? And the reason that we said here is start with one thing, because this can be overwhelming and it can feel like you're trying to boil the ocean. And so our advice really is just pick one piece, whether it's a specific component of the candidate experience itself, a piece of data that you may want to try and collect so that you can act on it, really anything, but pick one thing so that you can start your action. And then do it this month. Add a pop-up to your career site. This is actually a pretty low cost tech investment with an incredibly high ROI. One of the things that you can do with that pop-up is share hot jobs. And as Kerry uses hers, for regionalized visitors to the career site. So do it this year. Hold quarterly business reviews with your internal stakeholders. So analyze what you're working on, the results of the campaigns that you've run, and keep your key stakeholders informed on what you're doing. And Kerry, you had a great call out on doing that allows you then to make the case for I need new or different or changing technology or resources so that you can keep up with their demands. But they don't know it if you don't share it. And then
Exactly. Yep.
ongoing, communicate with your talent, whether that is via social, whether you have a talent community or a CRM. Send personalized jobs, send job alerts if you have that capability, and add variety to your content. And most importantly, ask your recipients, what do they want to hear from you? Don't just assume. And until you have the information to appropriately segment your audiences and send out those segmented communications, then you can choose that data. So I think that is our last slide in here. And then we are right at time. So I don't know if we're going to be able to do Q&A. Let me see if I can grab one. Here we go, Kerry. What tool are you using to allow for on-demand content changes on the careers website?
We are using Symphony Talent, Smashfly, or so formerly Smashfly, now Symphony Talent. We have the recruitment marketing tool, the CMS.
Yep. And there was a question, do you send email campaigns to all 7 million contacts or are they customized?
So we do both. And I was actually on a call last week with a company who said, well, we would never send to all 7 million people or all people in our database. We do, because it's company information that we're sharing, culture information. So we want people to get to know us. And then we want them to segment into their own talent communities. So that's one way that we do that.
Awesome. So the rest of the questions that we received, we will be sure and reply to you. We won't be able to cover them here because we need to wrap up, but we'll make sure and get those answers back to you following the webinar. Finally, for those of you that may still be listening, before we close, I just want to take a quick second to talk about what happens after you put all of these recruitment marketing strategies in place and you've changed the candidate experience, or you've started to positively impact the candidate experience, and how you can evoke joy in that process for all talent. So right now, the only candidate who feels joy in most of what we do are the ones who actually land the job. Hopefully they're happy. But for every other person who gets hired, there are tens of thousands, or potentially, Carrie, in your case, there might be a million or so who don't get hired. And we at Symphony Talent have a firm belief that every candidate deserves a dignified, positive, and speedy experience. So that's the joy factor, the element that we want our customers and our industry to achieve together. So we're partnering with leading global organizations to help people back to work faster with an exceptional experience. So we invite you to join us in this movement, a project that we're calling the Joy Pipeline. So as a follow-up to the webinar, we're going to share more information with you in an email, and look out for some exciting events. And we're also launching a podcast that's going to be coming out here pretty quickly, talking about how to bring joy into what we do as talent marketers, recruiters on a daily basis, but to all of those people that we know that might be looking for jobs as well. So that is it from us. Thank you all so much for listening, for joining, and certainly feel free to join us on social if you want to join the conversation at Symphony Talent _, or I am at B Ellis Recruits. And Kerry, what is your Twitter handle?
It is Kerry Noone.
There you go, at Kerry Noone. So thank you all and have a wonderful day.